All right.
So everybody knows we're being recorded.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. I'm so excited to meet all of you.
Wonderful to
Excited.
see you.
I'm looking at all of your pictures right now, so don't be creeped out.
We lost one, Gretchen. She should be back. And then Heather is joining after church, so she'll be a few minutes late, but she'll just drop in when she comes back.
Perfect.
So 2 more people still.
That's great. I'm trying to see how I can see more of you, like all of your
view. Change your view.
Yeah. Well, what a beautiful, what is it like by you guys? You guys are in
We're all over the place.
all over the place. How
Yeah.
did you meet? How did you become a group?
Through Brittany.
So I started it in 2020 before the pandemic. I added people locally, and then people started inviting friends virtually once we shifted virtual. So like Becky is in Virginia. Gretchen that's coming back, she's in Michigan. Natalie's in Michigan. I have a friend, Jessica, who travels between South Carolina and Mexico. So like she was sitting on the beach in Mexico for some of our meetings, which was crazy.
Oh, that's nice.
A lot of Meryl, who's in I was going to say, I don't know where she is for you. She is my back wall. So she has a townhome on the other side. Like literally, we share a wall.
That's
so everybody's
awesome.
kind of everywhere, which is super fun.
Oh, that's fun. Oh, and I love the book background. Brooke.
Thank you. Yes.
I was just, complimenting Brooke and said we needed one with our logo on it. So that's on my to-do list.
Yeah. That is great. So I am in Chicago.
Okay.
Well, ish. Oh wait, I just made you guys all go away. You just keep talking.
we can see you.
Can
Yeah.
you see me?
Yes.
We can,
Okay.
Emily, while you're doing that, you said Chicago-ish. Are you outside of Chicago?
I'm north of Chicago. So
Phyllis and
They're
I.
from a little town in Illinois, Watseka, which is central Illinois.
oh, okay. So I grew up in Orland Park, which is south of Chicago.
We're
And
more south. We're do you know where Kankakee is?
Yes.
We're more in that area, Iroquois County, close to the
Cool.
Indiana line.
oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I grew up as a little kid in Park Forest, Illinois, so south suburb of
Yep.
Chicago. And then when I went into high school, we moved into the city near the University of Chicago. So,
Oh, that's neat. So like Hyde Park.
yes, Hyde Park. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
cool. So many connections.
Yeah.
Oh, I found, and now I got you all back. Big
Oh, good.
perfect. All right, so we'll start, if that's okay, with a quick screenshot. That's usually so that we can put it in our blog and everything. And I'll share it with you, Emily, after, and then we can dive in.
Great.
Thank you for
Perfect.
holding up the
I love
book. All right, if you guys are ready. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, Emily, I loved this book. This is my favorite of yours that you've written so far.
so
I
good.
have to say, I've read everything you've written, and this is my favorite.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah,
Thank you
we
for
all
having
loved
us.
it. We were just
Yeah.
talking about how much, like, even as people were finishing in advance and waiting, everyone's like, oh my gosh, so good, so good,
So good.
That makes me so happy. This one was very personal and very close to my heart, and written during the pandemic, which made it even more emotional. You know.
Yeah.
So
How much of it is fiction versus nonfiction? So
the
I saw
present,
your sister's post.
the present day story is 100% fiction, but Evelyn's story. So I would say 13 years ago, I think it was. I was into family history. I've been really into family history, and especially on my dad's side. And so I was doing some research just for fun. And my dad gave me a box of family history. and in it was all kinds of stuff, like going all the way back to like the 1700s. But what I found in there, as I looked through everything, was this folded stack of papers, and some of it was like legal paper and some of it was not. Like, it was very interesting. And I pulled it out and I started reading it, and I realized it was a letter. And it was a letter from my great aunt Evelyn to somebody, and she started it out saying, "Okay, Stan, I'll play along. I'll tell you my story," And it was like 9 pages, and so a good chunk of Evelyn's letters in the book at least every single one has some part of one of Evelyn's original letters in it.
Oh,
Wow.
So I would say 70% of her story is real. So
Okay. Wow.
the connection with Mama and Evelyn, that's made up.
Okay.
So though we had what it is that there were other stories in our family history that were similar to it. So in that same family, the family that adopted Evelyn's younger brother, which is actually my grandfather, the mom that I don't know who she would be to me because we weren't related to them by blood, but I mean, I guess we used to call her what do we call her? I can't remember, but Mama V. So Mama V she was the one who had the RH factor, and she couldn't have children. And she had one child, and then all the rest of her babies died. And that was that moment of me going to the graveyard and seeing all of the little headstones lined up next to this family, and finding out that was what caused it. And then in that family, she had lost her 6th or 7th baby, and her husband shows up after she wants to die, after losing all of these children. He shows up with this little baby girl, and they always said that he just bought a baby because to make it so she wasn't so completely lost and depressed. And it's interesting. But have you read Soul? I think it was Sold on a Monday, I think is the book. There's a book out there right now that is about an adoption agency in Tennessee that stole babies, and that is also where
I've read.
It's Before We Were Yours.
Before We Were Yours. There we go.
Yeah, I've read that book, and I saw some documentary about it also. Yeah.
So anyway, that's crossover, but like an interesting thing that is like, wait, my family was involved in that too. Okay, weird, but yeah. So about 70% is what I would say. And if it wasn't about Evelyn, it was about somebody else real who existed. So that's a lot of
So the real Evelyn shot herself and became paralyzed.
Oh my God.
And she had a baby.
She had a baby. She died when she was 21.
Oh,
Wow.
And the real place is called the Home for Cripples. So in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. Yep. She did not live long.
Did you do research
There's
in
that
the?
place now that I can't remember where it is. It's just in the news and found all these bodies of children
It's in Florida, I think.
in Florida.
well, there's the Nickel Boys. Is that what I'm thinking of? It was the boys, but I believe the one that's been in the news recently was in Canada.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
Children, right, who were taken,
That's right. It was
framed, and they found all their bodies, these children.
Oh, it's so sad. And she died. We did have her death certificate, and so she died of a blockage in her intestine, which I think I put in the book.
Right.
Yeah. So that was her actual cause of death too.
And she had her baby after she'd shot herself? Because that sounded
Yeah. That the baby part is the part that I took from somebody else.
Okay,
So,
got it. Because
yeah,
that's very complicated medically. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
especially back then. Yeah. So that was the two people kind of mushed together at that point, and some magic of imagination in books.
Sure,
But
of course. Yeah.
Well, I appreciated that this was a book that didn't do that kind of old sitcom thing where, you know, mom's a lawyer and he's a doctor, and then they could be anything, because you never see any of that, where you actually saw her working. You know, Hannah was working the process.
right.
You were in the office with her. You were with her when she was going to investigate and talk to people. And it wasn't in an overly dramatic, cinematic way. It was but all the same, very fascinating. I mean, it was a page turner all the same, but it was taking the time to show you how she was doing her job.
You know, that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was, I worried. I actually talked to my editor. I'm like, am I going to bore people talking about the process she went through to
No.
figure this out? Like, because it is so much. She went here, she went there, she looked through archives. Like, would people rather just have it like summarized? But we ended up deciding that was the drama of a lot of it, was her doing that research, and that in order to see these discoveries and experience them as a reader, you had to see them and experience them on the page. So I'm glad that was something that translated.
Yeah, absolutely. Because usually it's like, oh, she went to work and she found a letter, she took it home, and yeah, I totally agree with Phyllis. Like it, it just felt like I was really there in her life in that moment versus, just skimming through stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. Yeah. And that research was made even more difficult because I had a trip planned to go to Memphis and Senatobia, and then everything, shut down. So, and I kept being like, oh, we'll go. And then it got more and more shut down. And then I started so then I called all the places. Well, most of the places were closed, completely closed at that time. And so that made it even more complicated. So finally, the library she went to, they opened up with only essential people, and I was able to talk to them. And I had already visited Senatobia several times before to do research, so I knew the area, and my dad was from there, so I interviewed him a lot. And then I used Google Maps, and I mean, I'm not kidding, I literally took Google Maps and I drove from Senatobia to Memphis to all the different locations. I took the actual roads using the satellite imagery. So, I mean, I was describing it from probably 2015 or whatever, whenever they probably originally recorded it for Google Maps. But that was the only way that I could get that actual research done at this time. So it made it, I'm actually hopefully going in a few weeks to finally have that trip. And I'm going to record stuff and then share it with my readers now that it's over. And let's just hope it all jives.
Oh my God, that's really cool. We always hear authors talk about research, and I never think about even something that seems so mundane to us who have to research. Like, how long does it take to drive from Senatobia to Memphis? Like, I read it in a book and I don't live there, so I just take it for granted, but you have all your fact checkers, spell checkers who would call you out on that. And
the readers who live there would go, well, she got that wrong. It does not.
Well, and I want people to feel like they are there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You are reading an author that's from the city, and if you live there, like there's one fiction author, she's really old. I mean, she may not even be living anymore, but she wrote a female detective character, so it was pretty early. It was written so long ago that it was pretty cool, because this woman was like, fighting and being kidnapped and all this stuff. But anyway, she all of her novels are based in Chicago. And I was fascinated. I was like, oh yeah, I know where she's talking about. Oh, that I know where she is on the lake. I know this, I know that. So it's just it's really cool when you're from the area.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was that was one thing that did make it a little limited, especially at that part, because the Chicago stuff I knew, but and this book was so much about the setting. It was so much about, the South, that it was hard for me. I was so glad that I had gone there and experienced it. I don't think I would have been able to write this story if I had never gone, if that wasn't where my dad was from and I had been there in my childhood. I had been there, like when my grandma passed away, the cemetery that I described, that's where my grandma is buried. And so, like I had experienced it, but I wanted to get it fresh and new, but at least I got some.
People get the South wrong, and we can say this, those of us who are Yankees, because if you don't know the South and weren't grown up in it, through it, and then you move to it like we did, because we're damn Yankees, because we stayed here, that's what they call us, you grow up with a sense of it that's very exaggerated,
Right.
the Hollywood version of it, and you get all these misconceptions about people
Yes.
from the South. If you haven't lived there, then they probably have misconceptions about Midwesterners. But once you live here, you realize that it is different than your preconceived notions about it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. My dad has always been the one, and my grandma. So my grandma lived with me when after she went through a medical crisis. So I cared for my grandma, who's a little bit like Mama. I would not say exactly like her, but a little bit like her, like a beautiful, like sweet, gentle Southern belle, And so I really did. That's kind of one of the things that prompted a lot of this story, was this this way of seeing my father and my grandmother, who were just these lovely, amazing human beings, and their experiences growing up and experiences when we would go back and visit in Mississippi, and then seeing the way that Mississippi is depicted and talked about in Illinois growing up here, because I lived in Florida until I was 12, so it's not technically the South, but like it was very interesting to come here and see the perception as well. So I kind of enjoyed trying to encapsulate that that conflict, that conflict that you have a bit as you do have that different perspective growing up in a different place. So
Interesting. I moved around a lot. I lived in Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, lots of places in Michigan. That's where I am now. But I haven't read any of your other books yet, but after reading this one, I plan to. But so I don't know if this is unique to this book or all your writing, but I was so happy with the end, because I cannot tell you how many times I read a book and there's just little things that aren't addressed, and it really bothers me. And you addressed them, because I was in my mind, I'm like, well, what about Guy's job? And then you addressed it. And I'm like, well, she really broke that NDA. Like, they're not going to address that. And then you did. And like all these little things, I'm like, she okay, fine. She wins. I can't pick it apart.
Good. I don't always actually. What I usually like having is a happy, unhappy ending. So this is the first truly happy ending, I think, where I'm like, all right, like, and what happens, and like, 'cause I like a book with a little uncertainty at the end. I actually don't love having everything tied up, but this one needed it. It was a different story than my other stories. So
well, I didn't need it to be happy tied up, but sometimes they just don't address things, and like it bothers me. Like whether he lost his job permanently or didn't, it didn't bother me. But sometimes and maybe a lot in TV shows they do it too. I'm like, that's so unrealistic. That wouldn't have happened because of this.
Yeah.
And they didn't even, So
what I've noticed is movies and TV shows have a wider berth for fiction than books do. In books, they're like tiny little things. They're like, oh, that's not going to happen. And then in movies, it's like they ignore science completely, like, wait a minute, you watch House or whatever, and you're like, that's not even how hospitals work, But in books, they do. They try to hold you to it pretty tightly. So, and you have to push back super, super hard to be like, but I want it that way, So, but readers hold you to it. In my first book, I had them, they're on an island, and they take some old antibiotics because someone is injured. And I can't tell you how many emails I got from like pharmacists being like, now that may not have worked. That was, what kind was it? It was the wrong kind. Certain kinds go bad and poison you. And I was just like, I wanted to write back and be like, so it's fiction. And they didn't do that. So, but I didn't. I was just like, okay, thank you.
Because, I mean, I guess unless you're writing a full out fantasy or something like that in that genre, and then everybody just suspends everything, you know, like you just suspend your disbelief. And in movies, you know, you're always asked to suspend your disbelief or whatever. So books, yeah, but when you start being, I think when it gets, when it's a little more autobiographical, or it's real places, real time frames, real historical um, facts and things that are going on, and but it is still a fiction, it's hard to blend those two. But I thought yours was great. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, what I've found is if you have something in there that's glaringly inaccurate, it takes the reader out of it. And when you're a reader, what I hope you are experiencing is everything Hannah is experiencing. I want you to feel like you are Hannah. And so if you have that moment of like, oh, that's not real, that sucks you out of that moment. And it's one of those put down moments, one of those moments where you would be like, oh, okay, and put the book down, you know? So it is important to me that you fully experience that to the best of my ability.
You know, one of the things that other people have mentioned, that I think Amy mentioned, that, you know, we felt like we were with you, we were with Hannah, is
Yeah.
that you had a lot, even though I wasn't not, you know, wasn't aware of it, you had a lot of physical detail about how people were moving, how Hannah was moving, you know, a lot of detail. And I haven't read a screenplay, or, you know, I'm not that familiar with screenplays, but it seemed like, you know, you had so much detail about people and their positions and their physical, that took us into what was happening.
Oh, good.
She
Yeah.
was walking, I mean, we were with her physically. You were describing what was going on.
That's it depends on a writer's style, because there are some writers who do a really great job with just having less description and things like that. But I think, like, even sometimes when I'm writing, I'll close my eyes and I will just try to imagine exactly what's going on, and write with my eyes closed. And so it takes extra editing sometimes. It does help me. And I think part of it is, I also act. And so I think that when I go about writing the same way I go about acting, which is I try to experience what the character is experiencing and then translate it in a way that an audience or readers can experience it as well. So I'm glad that translates.
Well, it certainly worked, because we clearly felt we were with her in the house, and, you know, wherever she went, we were there with her, which doesn't always happen, I don't think.
Oh, good. Good.
Who was your favorite character to develop, and who was the most challenging?
Hannah was the most challenging. I'll just start with that. So some of you said that you're from the Midwest or from, you know, the North, like, or maybe have been there, had experience. So my editor is from the South. So she was like, man, she's got a hard edge to her. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty typical of a very, you know, right? I see Meryl up there being like, yes. It's pretty typical. And so that one was hard because I needed to be able to convey her accurately, but always also make her somewhat likable. And Hannah was hard to like sometimes, I feel like, but I also have noticed with writing books that women read is that in general, we can be kind of hard on women sometimes, you know, and I'm not saying any of you are, but I do notice that like when my female characters are somewhat unlikable, that people are like, oh, she's annoying. And I'm like, yeah, she's going through some real hard times. So it is really interesting to try and make somebody, and that's not my personality. My personality isn't hard and like jump on everything and be offended by everything, kind of like Hannah was. And so that was something that I had to kind of switch and twist um, into another perspective. So I would say hers was the hardest. My favorite, I love Guy. Like I think I have a crush on Guy. Um, yeah, he's my favorite. He was so enjoyable. With Guy, what was interesting is because of the racial element of his character, I ended up doing some really insightful interviews with a man, a Black man that is my friend, and he really helped me bring this depth to Guy that I didn't have as a white woman, you know? And so he would read through a scene and be like, oh, you know, you're trying to make him not get upset or not angry here. Maybe because would make you feel better or Hannah feel better that he not be upset here. He's like, no, he would be upset here. No matter what a nice guy he is, he would have this extreme fear. He would have this extreme outrage. He would have these responses. He's like, you can put them through his eyes and his perspective, but like, let's make sure to not ignore his experience in this. And that was really amazing for me. And it really heightened his character and gave him a lot of depth for me as well. So
it's interesting you say that about writing him, because we do have a different perspective and we don't know. And when I first read it too, there was a moment like, why is he so mad? Or why, you know, and hearing you say that, you know, brings perspective to that. You know, the one thing when he kind of got mad about the breaking and entering, I'm like, well, you still helped. I mean, like, you still helped with that. But Brittany and I, early on when we were reading it, we were near the beginning. I believe it was when Guy picked her up at the gas station in Memphis, was the first time Brittany and I realized he was Black. And was that intentional?
Yeah. So
okay.
Because I think to Hannah, like it wasn't something where she's like, see this man, he's Black man, you know, like he's just a guy that she met. And so that was something intentional that I actually discussed, because I didn't have him I actually for a long time didn't even talk about him being Black. And my editor's like, well, we should probably specifically say it at some point. And so it was this debate of whether to say it at the gas station or say it when she first met him. And so when she first met him, I have the description of him, just like I think she would look at him and just say, oh, this is what he looks like. But to place a label of like, I don't know, personally, at least where I am at here, like I would meet someone who had, you know, whatever color skin I describe it, because I do describe him as having, you know, like a rich color to his skin or whatever. And I don't think I would be like, that guy's Black, because you don't even know, you know, like you don't even know.
I think
like,
you did describe him
I did describe
early
him.
with a darker skin. Well, you know, for me, that's anybody, because everybody has darker skin. I do. So you don't know necessarily that he's Black. He could be, you know, any other race that has darker skin, or just a Anglo who has darker skin. We don't know at that point.
And she didn't know, you know, like it. So I think it actually says a lot about her character that she wasn't like, oh, look, hey, there's that Black guy that works at my grandma's place, you know. I think that says a lot about who she is. And that's why I found it important for the issue of race to not come up until they directly talked about it together. So
The one place I got really angry with Hannah as a character
Yeah.
was because she was a little bit naive or acted naive to the racial inequalities and the realities of what it would be like living in that town and that
yeah,
place. And so when she left him after breaking in to the newspaper office and then left him, basically not having put any thought into the severe danger. I mean, in today, in the real world, he may have been killed and,
right,
shot in that situation. So, thankfully that didn't happen.
right.
In the book, and things were resolved, but it really, I was a little shocked that she didn't have that um thought in her mind of the danger that she was placing him. So I was, well, I mean, I'm glad the way it got resolved, but she talks about how much she learned and what she
Right.
the thing from him and from going through that experience. And
Right. And she was obviously very selfish in that moment. And so I thought what that hopefully showed about her character was how myopic she was. She was interested in Evelyn and Alex, and those were the things that she was chasing after. And it had taken her, I mean, think about it. She was even willing to not sacrifice, but give up her own life. Like she had tried to commit suicide over the situation with Alex. And so this hyper focus had taken over her life, and now it was affecting everybody else around her. So it was kind of like that dark night of the soul moment of realizing, oh my gosh, what was I willing to do for this obsession, So, but here is the problem, is that it took putting another person and disregarding another person's, vulnerabilities to be able to discover that. So that was I think you're supposed to be mad at Hannah in that moment.
Well, you also dealt with depression. I mean, we didn't come out of this like that you were in any way heavy-handed about the racial discrepancies and the racial views, or the I think it was just, or depression, but she was depressed and she did act like a depressed person, and it was not an easy fix. It was a gradual, difficult recovery. And we saw the struggle. And so, but we weren't even realizing that, oh, this is about depression.
Yeah, and that is a hard thing. I think it's really hard to understand depression from the outside. One of the things that I love about writing is I call it that it's the truest form of empathy, because you're spending some time in somebody else's life. And so it feels, it's going to sound a little cheesy, so brace yourselves. But it feels a little bit like an honor to be able to sometimes talk about things that people don't fully understand in a way that perhaps makes them a little bit more understandable to somebody, because they're actually being able to experience them. So my last book was about abuse. It was about a girl escaping an abusive parent. And in that, I wanted to really show what it was like to, because people always say, why don't they leave? So that's kind of what spurned that idea of being inside of her head and seeing her conflict to leave. And in the same way with depression in this one, I wanted to be able to have people, because you can't, a lot of times from the outside, you look at depression and say, well, why don't they just? And I think that's such a terrible beginning to any sentence, about somebody else. And so I think that it was important to be able to see that depression was something that also went down through generational, and that it was this was something that they all had learned to deal with in different ways. But Hannah had found a way to break that cycle in her family of suicide. And it wasn't an easy one, it wasn't an easy cycle to break. So that was a very heavy part that I do think it would be easy to overlook or judge. So So
Did you do research to write that with that level of detail and empathy and all of that? Because I feel like you did a really good job of helping us feel what she felt. You know what I'm saying? Like I could get into the bleakness and I could get into how she was caught up in Alex and how you lose focus. Like I felt like I could feel that through her.
yeah, like, so I have not actually experienced depression, but my family is felt like it is a generational thing. And there have been, I mean, Evelyn in real life, my great aunt tried to commit suicide, you know, and we have had suicide in our family. And it is definitely, so as I wouldn't say I did research as much as I've just lived some of those things. So, and experienced them through people I love. So I would say that was, and then I did ask my sister to read it, and who has been through similar struggles, and have her give feedback on what was, if this was landing in the right way. So as well. And I will say, I've not experienced depression, but I've been through a lot of therapy. So definitely have some perspective there. Plenty of other
Everybody's
things.
been through a bad breakup, because most people have been through a bad breakup.
And a bad breakup. Absolutely.
I was going to say, I think most of us have.
Yes, exactly. I'm so glad, like, okay, no, I'm not glad you went through bad breakups, but I'm really glad that that rang true to you, because my editor had been in a long and extremely satisfying relationship. And she was like, I don't understand why she's still sad. And I'm like,
If you've been through, if you've been through a bad breakup, I think that definitely rings true and it hit home. I'm like, I get it. I get how some of that lingers with you, and I get how it can be all encompassing and consuming at times. You know, you don't want it to be.
right.
And sometimes you don't even realize that it is until you're on the other side of it. Like she was, you know, once she had affected Guy in that way. Like she was just so caught up in getting to him and having that moment and him wanting her back or whatever. And it's not until she's on the other side and he's getting married, and he's still getting married. He's doing exactly what he intended upon doing, which made me so sad for her, because I'm like, he hasn't changed. I'm like, Alex hasn't changed a bit. Like he's still the same, excuse me, but he's still the same asshole he was all along.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he's doing exactly, you know, he's gonna have his cake and eat it too.
Yep.
Basically. And so I'm like, and then she affects somebody that she really has grown for, you know, grown like compassion for, and, you know, Guy's daughter and everything else. I'm like, and it's affected so much of this bigger picture. But I'm like, I felt for her in that moment, and I could see how it could happen. Like it wasn't so far-fetched to me or crazy, that I'm like, no, I'm like, she was caught up. She was excited. She had this meeting that was, you know, tied into getting information about Evelyn, and then she was going to meet Alex, and all she's been like wanting for and striving for, it felt like this whole time, is to get him back, to have her life back to the way it was.
Right.
She's like open doors of like, I'm gonna get information on Evelyn, and then I'm gonna go meet with Alex, and things are gonna be amazing. And not looking at the bigger picture of who, you know, the dominoes that fall in the process.
Right. And I kind of see it as, you know, when you're going through a mental illness or depression, there's a lot of self-medicating that goes on. And this was her self-medicating. She was self-medicating through her hyper-focus on Alex and through her hyper-focus on Evelyn. And you're right. She was like, this will make me feel better, you know, but then it wasn't until she did the actual work for a whole year that she came out the other side. And or I think it was 9 months. It was a good chunk of time, but that she actually felt better and could see things with a better perspective. So that's a really good point.
Even her looking at the social media, you know what I'm saying? And like waiting for that message, and her being like, well, surely my phone's been dead for X amount of time, so clearly now is going to be the time that he reaches out to me or whatever. I'm like, I see it. I felt it. I found myself doing things like that, I think. So to me, it made her very relatable and real.
Oh, good. Well, not good for you, but good for
Good for me.
history. I'm like, it is what it is, but it's not, yeah. So like, I think I felt for her where I'm like, oh, it made you not feel so alone in a moment, or the things that you do, which is nice, I think, too, because I'm like, oh, I'm a lot more normal than I thought I was, because I'm like, I'm always writing about it, so where, you know, like, you're not the only one that does that. Okay, cool.
Thank you for calling me normal. I will take it. I'm gonna write it down.
So yeah, and I think for me, it made me feel normal, you know, like some of those things that you do that, or those tendencies or whatever. I'm like, oh, it's written about in the book. I feel so much better.
You're welcome. Tell me other things. I'll add it to my books.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I got disconnected for a while. I'm up north and we just got this new hotspot. So we've never had internet up here before. And it's
Hey,
so.
you're at your vacation place, right?
Yeah. So one thing, and I don't know if it got addressed while I was gone, but we were talking about Guy and the racial aspect.
Yeah.
And one thing Brittany and I think we talked about also was once we realized you told us he was Black, we kind of went back and like, oh, that's why he said, are you afraid I'm going to steal your bike? And like his perspective of weird things that seemed, why would he say that? Or, because I'm putting it in there and sort of looking back at the clues you had maybe given, but we didn't really see them. And then, so it's kind of nice to be able to go back and piece together some of that stuff. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. I hope that works and translates. You guys are the first group I've let read this and let you know that I'm talking to. So all of this is brand new and exciting for me too, to hear your actual experiences, because I have obviously my editor and I have like my beta readers that I use, but I know those people. So it's really fun to get this perspective from you guys. So thank you so much for being willing to be this first group. It's really exciting for me.
Thank you. It was exciting for us too. When, putting the playlist together was fun too, but you worry like, is she going to hate these songs? Is like, or that doesn't fit. What?
Loved it. I've already gotten some responses to it actually, of people being like, I cried when I listened to this. I need to read this book. So thank you.
That's good.
I like that you kind of defied expectations, or at least, if you watch a lot of movies and TV shows and that, you have an expectation of what a politician's going to be. So when she meets up with who turns out to be a cousin of some sort, state senator, and you go, oh, he's going to be a bad guy because he's a politician and he's kind of smooth and charming, and we're being set up for him to double cross her in some way. He's not going to be the helpful guy he pretends to. He's going to be a bad guy, and he wasn't a bad guy. So, you kind of flipped it on us there, which is great,
Yeah, he's like a slightly skeezy guy, but in an adorable way.
I liked their flirtation, and I liked that they didn't end up in bed. I liked that they were flirty friends. That was real fun.
Yeah, my sister was like, I wish they were not related. They would have been cute together. I'm like, we would have had a terrible relationship.
With Alex, he was watching out for her.
Yes.
So, I mean, again, and also his great aunt, or his aunt, who we thought, oh, she's going to be the total dragon lady. She's going to totally squash her career and get her kicked out and get her fired and all this. And things didn't go quite that arc that. And then the TV show, they would have gone that way, but
because they would have needed more drama. But well, I did take this time to think. So in my family history, again, my poor family, I'm like, I better send them some copies of realizing right now. I mean, I don't think I will be this completely open all the time about how much of it ties into our family, but we did have a surprise cousin who none of us knew about. Even his dad didn't know about him. And when he came into our lives, it was joyous. We were so excited to find out. I only have one cousin on that side of the family. And I think we actually overwhelmed him because there are 4 kids in my family. And we were all like, yay, another cousin, hooray. Like, we wanted to talk to him. We wanted to know his kids. We wanted to know all of this. And so for me, I know that it's complicated, but with Mama, I just couldn't see any reason why they wouldn't, especially because there were also political motivations, but why they wouldn't be excited to find this out, you know, to find somebody, especially when the sin was so far in the past, you know, to be able to go and welcome her in and to make some amends for what their relative had done. I think we would all love to be able to do that. If one of our relatives had done something so horrific as their, you know, her father was, so that's Hannah's great grandfather had done, then, you know, you'd want to be able to make amends for it. So I guess we just gave them the benefit of the doubt that they were decent human beings. Finally, took them long enough, you know. So
Yeah, I just really enjoyed that this was a legit story that I was reading. It wasn't like, you know, this murder mystery thriller or romance beach read. This, you know, it was. I'm like, I don't know what genre to put it in, but that's a good thing because it's just a story that I'm just reading and I'm enjoying it for the sake of reading a story versus having, you know, trying to. Of course, you want to find out, you know, who done it at the end, but it was just such a genuine great story. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. It is interesting because Publishers Weekly gave their review of it and they're like, I don't know that this fits in the mystery thriller. And I agreed with them, you know, like that wasn't even sad for me that was part of their review, because I'm like, it's true. A lot of my books don't follow an exact genre line. So I hope that means that it can be relatable to more people. But it also has that effect of when somebody picks it up, thinking it's going to be a thriller, being like, oh, this is not what I expected it to be, you know? So
Yeah.
it was easier when women's fiction was more of a thing, you know, like they really have kind of dropped women's fiction as a genre really nowadays. And I think it's because it sounds so limiting because it just says women's fiction and then men don't want to read it. But I would say if that's a pretty accurate genre for this book, if I was going to put it somewhere. But it's,
Where are they going to put it in the bookstore? Where are they going to put the book?
I mean, I was shocked to find out that they had submitted it to Publishers Weekly as a thriller, as a suspense thriller. So I don't actually know. I think they just do. I mean, I think they now just call them contemporary fiction, like these types of, you know, or book club fiction.
Mhm.
Kind of a new label that's coming out. So I would say probably more like a book club fiction.
Okay.
Oh,
I hadn't heard that, book club fiction.
yeah, that's kind of, it's taking over the like chick lit and women's fiction kind of label and putting it into something that, you know, is really functional for people to be able to use.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they don't have a self-discovery whodunit genre.
we'll pioneer that one, guys.
Yeah. Gretchen's going to create us a new category.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So the ending, I don't know if you talked about that while I was off, like did not see that coming as a whodunit, like at all. I don't know if anybody did, but did not think she did it to herself.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, no, I didn't see it. I didn't catch it. I mean, I didn't.
So
I
Becky,
kept going, okay, who was it? Who was
Becky,
it?
who did you think did it?
Oh,
Yeah, good
I
question.
thought it was either the stepmom or the boyfriend, and I can't remember his name. I'm
I
sorry.
did. I thought though, I did not have a clear suspect. I thought stepmom. I thought boyfriend. I thought maybe that one, the horrible man. You know,
I thought it was.
I did not think her.
I thought it was the older gentleman. Like I thought something was going on, and he
yeah,
done something like possibly with the pregnancy or whatever. After the lake picnic situation, I'm like, I felt like he knew he had done something, and he was coming to take care of it before like things came to light.
Was that Mr. Fred or Freddie or something? Or
Yeah, Fred.
Oh, I went
Yeah.
darker. I thought it was maybe one of the sisters who was really mad that she got sent away and came back and took it out on Hannah.
Oh, Amy.
Oh,
Ooh, Amy.
really, Amy?
Oh, God.
That's a great
Tell her
twist.
sister.
Um,
I really
So-
caught the stepmom because she was just
she's a horrible human.
horrible character, horrible. But
Yeah.
I was the boyfriend because he really was crazy about her.
Yeah.
It's the part that we were exposed to of their relationship, and I didn't think him, but I didn't at all think that it was what it ended up being. That never crossed my mind.
Oh, that's interesting. So the news article that ended up revealing everything to Hannah was the actual news article that was in the Memphis newspaper at the time about Evelyn.
Wow.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, so that was actually how I found out even more information about her was that article. So,
So I'm trying to think relationship wise, like she was obviously depressed and somewhat suicidal. Was she suicidal because it was a mental illness and she shot herself, or was it the times and she didn't have any other option that she saw before her being a woman in the 30s? And if it was depression, is it like something that runs in the family, which kind of tells us why Hannah has that depression?
yes, and then so I think it was a little bit of everything, but I do think so in Evelyn's original letter, remember Evelyn in real life, she did not, the pregnancy did not make it, but she did describe these symptoms of depression in her letter that made me be like, oh my gosh, she was depressed. And then her way of saying, she didn't say it was because I was pregnant. In her letter, she said, I just thought the world would be better without Evelyn in it. And I'm like, oh, these are all, and then knowing that, so then the uncle killed himself in the story too. And, and Mama dealt with depression. And so and then Hannah dealt with depression. So I really did want it to be this generational thing that was passed down. So circumstances, of course, made it worse for Evelyn. But her, in real life, her sister also got pregnant out of wedlock and then married the guy and had the baby and all of that, so like that in real life would have been an option for her. She could have married a very wealthy man, and he would have had to marry her. But I do think, and it's as weird as it is for us to think, in that time that would have been seen as a success, as crazy as that is to us. But yeah, so I do think it was the depression that led her to the suicide. I think there were a lot of other things going on, but I think that that's ultimately what brought her there. So, which is important.
I read it, like, when I look back at the 30s and I'm reading about the 30s, to me, it sounds almost like really old but then as I started like just thinking about how was it for a woman in the 30s, but she also lived in some poorer conditions than maybe if I'm watching a movie from the 30s, those were different people who had different advantages. And then I had to remind myself, like, the 30s isn't that long ago, really. In my mind, I'm trying to place it like older, but then I watched a movie or something and like, okay, there was a lot going on. Like it was, I don't know. I had a hard time trying to visualize the 30s as I read it without reminding myself this isn't a long time ago, similar to the representations of what does a Southerner think of a Midwesterner or a Midwesterner of a Southerner. It's the same thing. Like, how do we see
that's
this
true.
historical context in our own personal views?
Well, you know what? I think that we don't talk about the 30s a lot. I think that they are that Depression era is something that's not really. We talk about World War I, we talk about World War II, we talk about all these others, but we really don't talk about the Great Depression very often. And I think it's because it's so sad and depressing, and excuse me, and there's not a lot of like love stories. I think we're starting to see more stuff come out from that era, but I do think it's like, do you want to read a COVID love story right now? Probably not. I'm like, it'll take me a long time I don't know if I'll ever want to watch or read something where I'm like, let's really re-experience that traumatizing event that we all went through, So it feels like as a society, we've kind of avoided that time period, but I am starting to see more of it come out now. So it makes sense that we can't picture it, because I do feel like that's a pocket of time that is often skipped over in literature. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, unless it's like
now that you say it. Yeah. The 20s, we get the 20s with like Gatsby and some other things, but yeah, not the
Right. That was a little more glamorous, I think.
Yeah.
Gretchen. Or at least we think of it glamorous because of
tumultuous, though,
Gatsby
I
and
think
40s and flappers and
right.
speakeasies. And then the 30s, it's grim. People are losing their businesses and losing their life savings. But it's interesting, the movies, because there were movies in the 30s.
Yeah.
That women were actually, before, what was it, the Hayes Commission, or there's some commission that came in and said, we're shutting all that down. Women were smoking cigarettes, and there was implications that they were working class women. They had jobs, it's not like our view of the 50s where mom's home with the kids. Women, they weren't on the farm working. They were shop girls. They had jobs, and they were a little more independent, and they were drinking, they were smoking, and heaven forbid, they were having sex. And that was actually kind of shown in some of the movies that were made in the 30s. And man, they came in and said, we're shutting that down. You're not portraying any more of this. And it all got very, homogenized and cleaned up and sanitized, and they're not going to show women that way. But that was actually going on because these women were young and they had an independence of a certain sort
until a certain point in their lives. I feel like once women got married, a lot of that independence went away, and then there were ways that they could make money, but they had to be certain ways in order for it to be proper, like running their boarding house out of their home. That was a way. Or if you look at the stepmother, like she was a housekeeper after her first husband died, and so she did need to make money, but she had this acceptable way of doing it. And then a big way to make money as a woman was then to marry a guy and make money through him, or by being his spouse or keeping house or whatever it was. It was an economic situation a lot of times, more so than it was a love situation.
Yeah. And I wrote a little bit in the beginning of my review, but it was really weird. A friend at work and I were talking about how far back do you remember in your family? And they said, really, you only remember 2 generations. I don't know my great grandparents. I don't know their stories. I know my grandparents and my parents.
Yeah.
And that you have this story of Evelyn. It's kind of unique. We were talking about this, so my kids remember me, my grandkids might remember me, but am I gonna know my will I just be this? Yeah, I know there's someone who was my great grandmother, but they don't know our stories. Right. And I was thinking about perspective wise, now that there's so much on social media and there's so much of our lives that are there, that will our future ancestors be able to look back, and pictures are more prevalent, and blogs, and people are putting so much of their personal life out there. Our future generations going to know us better than we've known past generations.
I love that idea.
That just prompted me.
Sorry, keep going.
No, that was done. I was just saying, like, the book and that conversation kind of went right hand in hand at this right time. So.
I love that. So this is my fear is that, like, when I think of what I've learned of my family, so much of it, like these little gems, especially like this letter from Evelyn, is just a random piece of paper that somehow got passed down. And I do have these moments where I'm like, all of my memories are virtual. They're all on a computer. They're all saved somewhere on a hard drive. And it makes me want to have physical representations of things more than I do, because, you know, like what happens if Facebook shuts down and all of your, you know, all of that is gone or whatever, you know? So like thinking of also having real things to pass down has become something important to me, because it's those little things. Like my great grandmother had a set of silver that when she lived in Senatobia during the Civil War, and when the Northern Army came through, she went into her backyard, she dug a hole and she buried her silver, and it was the only thing that she still had afterwards, that she came out and then started a new life with. Well, I have one of those spoons and it has her initials on it, and that means so much to me, to have that one physical thing that belonged to her with her initials on it, knowing she held it. And maybe it's because I'm a writer, but like that is so meaningful to me. So in a lot of ways, I do think we'll know more, but like I do have also this thought of like, I want to make sure to leave things as well, you know, for my progeny or whatever.
Yeah, I have, my grandparents are gone now, but I have things from their home.
Yeah.
That I have this painting in the living room, and it's my grandmother painted it. It's not the most beautiful thing, but I have another one in my formal dining room, and my kids have some. I'm like, I'm never gonna take them down. My grandma painted them, and you know, and I have some other things too, some bowls and things like that. But it is so, I never thought about it in terms of, I like them, but for my kids and their kids. And my grandmother was a very unique woman, and I did a lot of research in college on her, and I wrote a paper, and I started thinking about it, like, where is that? I think it's in a box somewhere, but that is something that I can hand down, and then my kids who never met my grandmother can read about her. And
I love that.
We're starting to get a little bit of rain, so
Oh, yeah, get
Anna,
inside.
little bit of sprinkling.
or Atlanta's doing the storyboard that's getting filed at the Library of Congress. Have you heard about that? You can pick somebody and interview them, and they set it all up for you. They record it, and it's being filed with the Library of Congress.
That's pretty cool.
It's any relationship, anybody in your life. It's not important people or celebrities. It's just anybody.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so your family and maybe, or anybody, random people might come across it and listen to this experience or interview that you do.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
I'm kind of I've thought about this, how much we document our lives, just we in general. And I'm actually kind of bugged by that. I don't like that we have all these pictures, all these words, it's just, I think it's overload. I don't know. I'm a little disturbed. I think it's going to be very different than, for instance, Emily, what you were doing with going through the research with the old letters. If someone, you know, let's go forward 50 years, and someone wanted to research one of our lives, it would be if the whole cyber universe has not evaporated,
right?
It'll be so much easier to do that. And I don't know, I think we're losing something. It's a fairly new thought for me, and I haven't quite gotten through all of that. I'm in the process. I'm trying to clear out stuff, clutter, and I have been getting rid of old letters that were handwritten, so there's no copies, but I'm getting rid of them. They're from, I have hundreds of them, and it was great. I was a letter writer. My friends were letter writers, but I need to let go of that. And I sort of feel like this over documentation, I don't know. I want it to stop or slow down or something.
Well,
anyway, this is a new thought.
There's privacy too, like, because when you say you have all these letters in your turn, I'm like, send them to me. I want to read them. No, I want to hear this story of your life, you know? So, it's this deciding what you do want to share, you know? And a lot of times I think, especially this new generation, they're going to have to deal with a lot of things that they're like, oh, crud, that's out there. Like,
Yeah.
shoot, you know? So it is,
Yeah.
that's an interesting thought. And send me those letters if you don't want them anymore.
And where are, and who is it in these letters and what year?
I will make up, I'll fill in the blanks. Don't worry. That's awesome.
So Emily, you're in Chicago now, right now?
Yes, yeah.
I'm just curious, like, you just said it's raining by you, Phyllis. I'm in Michigan, so I'm not too far from you.
Yeah, I was just getting a few drops and I thought I better get in before there's some kind of deluge. And again, I apologize for looking like a world bazaar back here, but the painters will be back tomorrow and we have to get everything from upstairs, downstairs, as they finished upstairs, and then we'll have to reverse
Oh my gosh.
everything upstairs so they can paint the downstairs.
That's
A lot of fun.
That's great. Well, do you guys have any other questions or anything you'd like to know?
Are you working on anything else right now? And can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I've actually started 2 new books. Neither, yeah, and they're very different from each other. So, so yeah, well, neither of them have a pub date yet, but I have had a lot since we've started coming out of all of this. I've had a lot of like a surge of creativity. So, I'm trying to think if I can. This is going to be put online, right? The
On the blog, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'll tell you guys if we turn off the recording.
You want me to turn it off?
Emily, I have a question.
Well, let's go ahead and say goodbye, and then we can stop the recording, and then we can talk.
Okay.
If that works.
That works.
Oh, okay.
So we'll just this is the end of the meeting or whatever. So
Okay.
we can go ahead and stop, and then
I'll
okay.
tell you
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was great.
Thank you guys. Thanks.
Very interesting.
You guys have done like above and beyond. I just have loved having you in my life. I'm gonna like miss getting my emails. Brittany, you kept me like productive. I love it. So.
Well, if you want to do with the next book, if you need a group again to read it, I'm like, we would happily be your book club that does that.
Love that. I would
Absolutely.
absolutely love that.
And we can do the same thing. We can do like the playlist to say thank you. That way it kind of gets everybody excited. We'll get as many reviews as possible because there's 25 of us that kind of join from time to time. Nobody has to be here every time, kind of as people are able. So if you want to stick with us, we'll keep reading your books early. I'm like,
Okay, sounds great.
I'd love that. So
I am up for that. I am signed on. Well, thank you guys. You were wonderful, insightful readers, and I appreciate you so, so much.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.